Plumas Arts would like to recognize that our programming happens on the traditional and unceded land of the Mountain Maidu, and then also the Paiute and the Washoe to the east, and the Concal and the Nisan to the southwest. And we thank them for the opportunity to be on their land.
So the California Creative Corps, it's an economic and workforce development pilot program. Priorities are the environment, water, energy, climate, disaster, public awareness related to these things, climate mitigation and emergency preparedness, relief and recovery. And of course here we have to, we started by acknowledging the unbelievable fires that you've had to navigate in the last few years. And then civic engagement, including election participation, social justice and community engagement, and public health awareness. According to the Healthy Places Index, the darker blue the area, the more the need to find opportunities to serve those communities. They're the least healthy communities.
All the economic indices are on the lower side. That's the one that really is drawing the score down. So again, digging in to look within the areas, also within this track, you can see that for healthy habitability. So that was another area that drew it down.
Tracks, we're now looking at 5.02.
And what surprised me on this one, you'll see I did the two flags there. One is again looking at that very low employment, but a very high per capita income. A lot of vacation homes and retirees. And so again, looking at the numbers, what helps us the most is you all telling us about what that means in terms of what you're seeing there.
When we consider how to fund grants, and we need there to be some acknowledgement of historically underrepresented voices and communities, whether that's racial, cultural, and the Healthy Places Index shows us in each community the makeup of that particular tract. How can we work with artists in Plumas County to come up with projects that sort of throw a light on this in some way? Is it working with a housing commission? Is it working with a social service organization for unhoused people? What is it? So in this particular track, you can see that social is like really down there in the dark blue, and transportation's not looking great either. So let's look at social. You can see that the indicators that measure social components are the degree to which folks have participated in the census and the degree to which folks are participating in our election system.
Good Lord, that data misses a lot of nuance.
Yes.
Yeah. That is the thing that astounds me of not even nuance, but facts of life living here. The data is really interesting, how it doesn't, at least for me, reflect what it's like here.
I think that this area has a ton of stories to tell. I heard that 70% of the land was federal lands. The 90%.
The 90% was surprising to me.
Is that accurate? So public art, community spaces to gather, and telling our history and through murals, through signage, through
it's like Plumas County under the numbers. Those numbers make it feel like it's fucking miserable to live here, and that's not true. For some of us, are people struggling in Plumas County? 100%. And I've seen whether it's the state grants or even just kind of how people discuss us, or even our tax base, whether it's 70 or 90% with federal lands. That's a missed tax base for us. The reason why we don't have any parks is because we don't have public transportation to public lands.
So that's something immediately. That's an issue that is solvable, isn't it?
Yeah, and one cool thing that you'll appreciate is our bus now goes to Reno once a week.
How could this work not just for public art, but also, theatre folks as well? Is there something, perhaps it's connected with the storytelling? Perhaps it's a travelling theatre show that goes to some of the most remote places that would never otherwise come in and enjoy the Black Box Theatre here?
Well, we're always trying to think of ways to raise more awareness and how to access everyone in our community, especially people who don't have as many opportunities. Sorry. And just the education around how important healthcare is, and being in a rural community, we already are at a disadvantage of what's available here. And
we want you to be working with sectors. Part of the WPA program of the 30s and 40s, the success of it came from the fact that it was the government, the federal government, that was putting artists to work in unusual areas as it came out of a depression. How can artists help create something vital and positive and fresh?
A post-COVID world in rural areas and how that affected our land use during that time, how it affected our economy, and yet also how everything was closed. So people weren't really adding to the economy, but coming up here and now buying, second homes from the Bay Area when we already have a housing crisis. Important to think about is the people who are probably really represented in these slides are also not here. They don't come to these kinds of meetings. They're not invested in these kind of conversations. Why that is, that's really multifaceted. I don't think that this is like the most unhealthy place to live, but I also think we have a huge lack of mental health resources. Our public health resources are really underfunded.
We asked, we were asking for input on, how should we divvy up this essentially $3.4 million among 19 counties? Should it be only focusing on county densities of blue area tracts within the Healthy Places Index, i.e. those communities that this data deems are the least healthy communities compared to other communities across California? Or should we look at county population, its geographic size? Are there county tribal and ethnic considerations? There should always be those. Obviously, we're always going to look at your overall proposal strength. And then just bear in mind, argue your case for community conditions if they haven't been picked up on by the HPI index. Because remember, it only comes forward as 2020.
Well, I live in what we call in Greenville the SCAR, so I live surrounded by black.
Yeah.
It's hard to talk sometimes. I raised my children there, and now my community's gone, it's black. And it's bringing up the desire to do art again. We have history there. We have history like the old Indian school that burnt down. That's not the greatest history, but it's a history that needs to be brought up and talked about.
It was a very low percentage, and that was for the economic development in that area. And I was thinking, wow, that's crazy. So that, in my mind, if I were looking at the county, I would look at that. I'd say that's a target. That's a place where we need to do something.
One of the thoughts that came to mind is we have a massive lack of youth engagement in this county, and specifically with lower income brackets. Most of them spend their days doing this. And for those listening at home, I'm staring at my cell phone. But we live in the Upper Feather River watershed, and we have a big disconnect between youth and how they perceive the outdoors around them, understanding even where their water comes from, or taking an interest in preserving where their water comes from. If we created a program throughout the year that not only studied the progression of seasons, but also studied recovery and restoration effects from wildfire, and was geared to children with both a naturalist and an artist guiding it, you could have an entire year-long project right there.
Well, for heaven's sake, where's your application?
Apparently I need to start writing it tomorrow when I get into the office.
One thing I've been thinking a lot about is down Canyon, someone painted the bus stop recently in the last couple months. And I was thinking a lot about it with like the civic engagement, social justice, as I used to have a lot of kids take the bus to get to work. Let's like celebrate that space. It's also like, we know if you don't have a car here in Plumas County, it's unbelievably challenging to access anything.
And so creating a beautiful space around the bus stops.
I've been connecting with other women and men that live in the SCAR, And we just have to keep telling our story because we're still in shock.
Of course.
And so the more we hear it, that whole Native American idea of the circle with the quiet stick or the talking stick. Nobody's the leader, nobody's the therapist. We're just like, this is what we're all experiencing. And maybe if we hear it enough times, we'll get what a big deal it is.
Yeah, the idea, it's almost like the project, there could be a project called the Talking Stick here, with everything that's gone down in Plumas.
She's doing a videography project around the fire, some sort of engagement.
A sort of documentary and engagement piece, a story.
And I don't know if it's specifically about the Dixie Fire or just about our environment here in Plumas County and the fire regime that we have here and all of our historic fires.
Imagine if you had a group of peer mentors who could be at each of the, seasonal outings of various ages, from small children to big children, or maybe even adults involved,
And so
using
the best,
theater skills and collaborating and all that.
sounds amazing. So you're going to basically employ a sort of artistic director, basically, type person, who is engineering this ensemble of young people who are themselves are peer mentors, who are spreading awareness for a public health issue that's close to home.
Yes.
I want to, Julie, this is such an amazing idea. I love it. Has every single public health aligned?
I live here and I love this county, and so that's why I came to this session in particular. But I think that it could be a regional thing, just letting people know that they need to contact their counties to let them know if they did move, if they want to keep their Medi-Cal.
I mean, it's one of the very things that the Healthy Places Index measures when it considers the relative health of a community in a tract. You can actually see one of the measurements is the degree to access to insurance. So start thinking about artists who could work with your agency, who would want to. And we know that there are so many strong data points, correlations between historically marginalized communities, including, our BIPOC and Alana communities who are not in this room tonight. Please share the word, please spread the word. I know Cara will be helping to do that. And as much as you can do that, that would be super. And then we're not sort of, prolonging the issue of access to this kind of funding.